How's it going, people? Simon Slapper here, and this is Runescape lore, and we're carrying on where we left off, and this is where we're showcasing the Mahjarrat themselves and their actual stories. As each Mahjarrat, well, in fact all of them, kind of play a major role at one point in the history of Geilinor itself. So far I've given you the brief overview, which tells you about pretty much all of the Mahjarrat in general, and we've gone into a bit of detail with Inakra in the last one as well. And prior to that we had Akthanakos. So today we're going to be having a little bit of a closer look at Hazeel. Now this is probably one of the first Mahjarrat you would have heard about and even seen in game, depending on what quests you do, as you can actually see Hazeel himself within the Hazeel cult quest. The only other time you actually get to see him is within the Ritual of Mahjarrat and a few cutscenes here and there. But as the Hazeel cult doesn't really have major kind of requirements to actually do the quest, it's very likely Hazeel was the first one you found, or even heard about. So with that said, let's have a little gander at Hazeel, shall we? Well, Hazeel himself allied himself with Zamorak, which makes him a Zamorakian Mahjarrat. And he originally dominated the region that we now know today as Ardone. That was until he was eventually defeated by some Saradominus peasants, which were led by an ancestor of the Kandarin family. Hazeel himself had participated in Zamorak's rebellion against Zaros, and fended off Zaros' bodyguards while Zamorak fought with Zaros. Because of this, there was no interferences in the fight, and it could very well have proved to be one of the main factors of why Zamorak came out victorious in that particular fight. Hazeel himself, though, still has some followers today, and we do know that these are attempting to revive him after he was put into a state of torpor. And as you know, if you've completed the quest, a bit of a spoiler here, you do see him again within the Ritual of the Mahjarrat. So, it would seem that his followers have successfully revived Hazeel as well. During the Hazeel cult quest, should the player either side with the cultists, then Hazeel would revive, after which he would then travel north to attend the Ritual of Rejuvenation during the Ritual of the Mahjarrat quest. However, should the player side with the Carnelians, the player would then reclaim the Carnelian armor. And supposedly this was meant to prevent Hazeel's return, but as we know, Hazeel is back, he is alive and well, which must be the fact that the Carnelian armor, which you obtained from Alamone, clearly did not prevent Hazeel's return. So, I wonder how he did it. Unfortunately, that hasn't actually been told to us yet, although there are some theories floating about. But anyway, let's get on with it. Let's start at the very beginning. Same with the rest of them, back when they very first arrived within Geilinor. The Mahjarrat first stepped foot on Geilinor during the Second Age. This was when Icthlarin, the Menethite god, actually brought the Mahjarrat from Runescape, their realm, to aid Icthlarin and his desert pantheon in the fight against Zaros in the Caridian desert, which at the time was actually forested and quite vegetated. With Hazeel, along with many other Mahjarrat, they were found to be known as the stern judges of Icthlarin while serving the desert gods. And indeed, the Mahjarrat themselves actually fought against Zaros' minions when they tried to dominate the desert, and in turn the Mahjarrat easily won this battle. In fact, this impressed Zaros to a major degree, and through a series of events, Sliske, as well as many other Mahjarrat, slowly began to change sides and slowly started to switch over towards Zaros, after Icthlarin started to try and set rules against the Mahjarrat, things they can and cannot do. And the Mahjarrat, being the Mahjarrat they are, did not take kindly. However, after switching sides, after he eventually moved and joined with Zaros and his brothers and sisters of the Mahjarrat kind, it was at some point the Zaros ended up tasking a flock of Ripper demons to destroy a small village, and honestly, we still don't entirely know the reasons for it. However, there are some hypotheses simply because of who actually lived there. The village itself was extremely fragile. However, this village in particular that these Ripper demons were sent to actually housed Torva. If you don't know who Torva is, he is an extremely powerful melee fighter who actually wiped out the entire flock of Ripper demons on his own. And at the time, keeping in mind that Torva is, in fact, just a mere human, this act was shocking to say the least. And seeing this, Hazeel grew impatient and decided to complete the job himself. However, much to his surprise, and to everyone else's surprise, Torva was not afraid at all of this Mahjarrat, Hazeel, and was actually able to survive Hazeel's attacks. It was after this, after witnessing this shocking event of a human standing toe-to-toe with a full-fledged Mahjarrat by the name of Hazeel, that it was actually Nex that came along and recruited this human named Torva as her Zerosian general. After some time had passed though, most of the Mahjarrat were no longer content with Zaros' lead, and this soon started to plot against him. Zamorak, who was at the time a Zerosian general, was the leader of this pack. And it was at this time that Zamorak eventually found the Stone of Jazz, and soon after, the Staff of Armadyl luckily fell into his hands. Or was it orchestrated? Either way, these two items were the key to putting Zamorak's plan against Zaros into action. So, Zamorak attacked Zaros' castle, and with his many followers, Hazeel, Lord Dragon, Thamon, Vigora, and many others, it was during this fight that Zaros actually fought with Zamorak and eventually was impaled on the staff, at which point it transferred much of Zaros' godly power to Zamorak, turning him into a god, and simultaneously making Zaros leave Geilinor. Although during that fight it could very well have gone either way if not for Hazeel, and Zamorak's subordinates actually managed to keep off Zaros' defenders and his bodyguards. So let's move it up in time a bit. During the end of the God Wars of the Third Age, the Mahjarrat Gazad was born. This was with his mother Palkira, dying soon after however. Hazeel began to tutor the young Mahjarrat, and together they soon dominated much of southern Kandarin, including the area which today is known as Ardome. They ruled this land with an iron fist, and the territory was a huge Zamorakian stain on the map of Saradominists. However, soon after, runecrafting was discovered, and the Fifth Age slowly began. A group of Saradominists decided to attempt to liberate the land, covered in brutality and cruelty, and the leader of this group was of the Carnelian family. They wanted to do anything within his reach to defeat Hazeel, ignoring whispers that Hazeel was not a mortal man and couldn't truly be slain. On one dark night though, this leader and his group of swarmed Hazeel's mansion and executed every Zamorakian within. However, they only managed to put Hazeel himself into a state of torpor. Soon after, the leader claimed Hazeel's mansion for his own. The territory, at this point, is now free of Zamorakian influences, and it began to grow rapidly, and soon after, the city of Ardome was created, the greatest city of Kandarin. Many years later, in the year 169 of the Fifth Age, an adventurer, which we don't actually know the name of, was given a quest by one Cyril Carnelian. He was a descendant of the one who had led the assault against Hazeel. Cyril asked the adventurer to recover his ceremonial armor, which had been stolen by a group of cultists which had broken into the mansion many times. The adventurer eventually found a cultist known as Clivet in a cave in the forest south of Ardome, whom had actually asked them to aid them in the reviving of Hazeel. It was at this point, which we're not certain on the details, It's said that the adventurer was given two choices, whether to decide with the cultists and help with the cultists in actually trying to revive Hazeel, or try to retrieve the armor and side with the Carnelian family, in turn trying to block Hazeel's revival. However, this is said to vary between person to person, so we can't have a guaranteed answer on this. Either way though, the end event of this was actually that Hazeel did eventually re-emerge from his death, and once again reappeared at the 18th ritual of rejuvenation to regain his strength and power. It was at this point that he appeared shortly after his student General Khazad and agreed with his idea of sacrificing a Zarosian Mahjarrat, namely Wahisiatul. After Wahisiatul demanded that the sacrifice be Lucian, a fight had broken out. Hazeel decided to aid Khazad in fighting against Sir Tifikashian and Idriar. However, after Arav was freed from Zamoragul's control and attacked his former master, Lucian refused to aid Zamoragal, and, witnessing this sight, the Mahjarrat soon turned against Lucian, with all present attacking him. However, despite Hazeel and the other Mahjarrat's efforts to try and sacrifice and slay Lucian, Jilan was instead sacrificed, which in turn rejuvenated Hazeel and the other Mahjarrat present. This restored their flesh. Shortly after though, Lucian was soon killed by a trio of Dragonkin, and Hazeel showed a great deal of indifference towards this, merely stating, before teleporting away with his fellow Mahjarrat. His followers currently await his return from his business in the north. Additionally, Hazeel was meant to be part of the congregation of the Zamorakian Mahjarrat at the Empyrean Slippeddale during Sliskay's Grand Ascendancy, along with Zamoragal and Inakra. However, some have stated that he wasn't there. Perhaps this was because of the choice during the Hazeel cult. So there you have it, that is Hazeel. He's a bit of an oddball of the bunch because most of them kind of played major roles in kind of like the major parts of history. However, Hazeel, honestly, other than the fact that he joined Zamorak in trying to kill Zaros and slay him, he didn't really play other major roles in like huge parts of history. And he was actually in another section of the world compared to most other Mahjarrat. He was actually within the Kandarin region, and did in fact take over and manage and hold the entire Kandarin area, along with the Zamorakian followers. So although Hazeel may not be as well known as some other Mahjarrat, and his name might not be quite as big as some other Mahjarrat on impact, but this Mahjarrat in particular I would pay careful attention to, as this Mahjarrat literally took over an entire region with his own hands. Not many can say that. So that is it. I hope you all enjoyed. That was a bit of a closer look at Hazeel. Until next time people, I will catch you all later. Have a good one.